Holger. Congratulations, Holger, on the Kickstarter campaign that you're currently running, right? Could you tell us a bit more on that, on Chris, how that is going?
It goes very well. We started last Tuesday and hit the funding goal in just 8 hours. And everyone who understands Kickstarter a little bit, it's the funding goal is the ultimate milestone that the Kickstarter runs. And it's a great experience, first time for me and the team, and team is doing a great job. And last night we hit 165,000 euros and almost 900 backers. So from that perspective, very well.
Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, Holger has over 15 years of experience in managing and building technology-driven companies with also innovative business models in the future mobility sector. Really a mobility expert. And as mentioned, recently his company, German Autolabs, launched a Kickstarter campaign for Chris. And Chris is a digital co-driver. And as you mentioned, the target was reached in only 8 hours, so congratulations on that. And in addition, his company also received a seed investment of 2 million euros. So, Tom, we talked about something you did this morning. What did you do also on the topic of mobility?
Yeah, so that's a funny side note. I went to the Labo, you know, the Berlin authority, to register a vintage car. And I sensed, Derk, if you want to hint at how this works together with working in a mobility startup, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had some bureaucratic experience.
Yeah. So I have to give some credit to the Berlin authority, other than we sometimes experience with registering employees from abroad. Yeah. If you want to register a vintage car in Berlin, that works very smooth. They reply to emails, which some other authorities don't do. And I had the appointment at 8 o'clock, and I was asked to come in at 7:55, so 5 minutes earlier. So that is, let's say, nice credit, and let's hope that that will apply to all Berlin authorities soon.
Yes, so political message, very good.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, coming from a background in corporate law and banking, Tom is in charge of the day-to-day operations at Door to Door, and actually they dream of a car-free city, where space is for people and not for parking. And at Door to Door you also believe that when public transport and other mobility alternatives efficiently meet citizens' demands, private cars will no longer be a desirable alternative. So, Tom, also a very warm welcome to you.
Yeah, thank you, Derk.
Kick off this panel with questions about the future of mobility. Because, mobility as a concept is maybe not new to you guys, but is new to lots of other people. So when did mobility from just a car became all of a sudden a concept? Maybe Tom, you can start with that question.
So we are doing it now for a couple of years, looking at how technology can transform mobility. And in fact, if you look at the vast majority of use cases out there, it's still pretty much as it used to be before the internet came out, right? So the regular public transportation, every bus, every subway, that still operates exactly as it did 1985. Which is an interesting thing to see, because all the other industries are heavily being disrupted. And I think this is now what we observe, that the internet takes over also mobility, and that has various implications. And one of those implications is obviously that you can put much more attention on the demand side of things and not so much on the supply side, because traditional public transport, they offer a supply to all of us, and we have to comply to that supply, right, to a timetable, to a fixed route. And it might work well or not so well. Normally it doesn't fit our individual need, but that is how it used to be in the 80s. And now we have modern technologies, we have the internet, we have mobile phones, we have algorithms, we can do that much better, and that's what we do, and that is one of the probably most intense impacts we see.
Can you name one example of what your company is currently
Of course, I'd love to. So we operate our own minibus service in Berlin. It's called the Alligator Shuttle. Some of you might have tried it. It operates on the weekend nights. And what it does, it gives you a personal public transit experience. So you have your app and you say, I'm here at the Humboldt-Uni and I want to go, let's say, to the Berghain. And what we do then is we look if there is a minibus close by, and also if you can combine that route with other people who have similar similar origin or destinations. And that works very nicely. This ride sharing works very nicely, and it's one of the many things one has to do to transform the city, as Derk said, away from all these individual trips to a more collective shared experience where you can reduce the number of vehicles but have the same comfort to go from door to door in a vehicle.
Yeah. So Holger, who do you think that in the end will design the future of mobility? Will it be the tech companies?
It will be also the tech companies, and I echo everything that Tom just elaborated on. I mean, with the capabilities we have today, we are just at the beginning to turn around user behavior completely. And that is something I think that we see in great companies like Flixbus, etc. We see it in the increasing number of sharing community, car sharing, scooter sharing, bike sharing. I mean, actually, I can move in Berlin completely without a car. Right, and that is something that is in a city something very comfortable because you don't need a parking space, etc., and so on. So. And that's something that we have to see, that there are different dimensions and different developments that at the moment coming together in the same time. And one thing is the availability and the penetration of, let's say, as simple as it is, smartphones, right? So with the smartphones, it became possible to have these floating car sharing pools, etc. That triggers, especially in younger generations in urban areas, a change of user paradigm and so on and so forth. But we also have phenomena like a company like Tesla, right, who came 10 years ago, said, okay, we will disrupt the way how we move, and we offering a piece of hardware directly to the consumer. So they took out the dealership in the middle, and so on and so forth. So that's something where I think it's technology, definitely to a widest extent that will trigger that, with all the ecosystem around, all the cloud computing, etc. But it's also that mankind, as we speak, is changing the behavior with respect to mobility.
Yeah, but with data becoming and technology becoming more and more a commodity, in the end, what will be then the next step when you say everybody in the end has like a level playing field? What in the end will then decide? Because you've chosen for a voice interface with Chris. Yeah. So why did you go for voice as an interface for car users?
So there are two questions that. So one thing is how will what is the next iteration with respect to mobility, right? So, and that is something we definitely will see autonomous systems, and we will see autonomous cars and shuttles, etc., and so on and so forth. Well, we definitely will see. That's my prediction over the next 10 years, is the first turn from I own mobility and I access mobility. So I don't own a car anymore, I don't own a bike anymore, etc. But at the moment, so I could come here in the morning with public transport, BVG, a great company, then I take a bike, then I take a car to go, a smart to go, drive now, etc. At the end, I have 7 different invoices coming in, right? That makes no sense. Today, from a big cable operator, you get your mobile phone contract, your TV contract, your internet contract, and it's all on the same invoice. And by the way, if you're traveling to the US and you do roaming, or to Greece and do vacation, this doesn't show up in a special invoice. It shows up on a roaming contract. Downside is you have to pay for, right? So that's one thing. That's about mobility. With respect to what we are doing here, it's a part of this evolution, but that goes beyond mobility. What we will see in the next 5 to 10 years is that what we all loved with Star Trek Enterprise, when Captain Kirk said, "Computer, where's Lieutenant Uhura?" So we're starting to talk to machines as if they are a counterpart, a human counterpart, and that's something that you can see or explain to a certain extent. Again, from technology, we have a breakthrough in technology understanding, etc. In the past 5 years, and that's also driven by elements like Alexa, Siri, and so on. So, and our prediction, and that is what we're working at, is that it makes no sense that 85% of car drivers at the moment driving their cars and using their smartphones while they're driving the cars, because that is freaking dangerous and illegal, and the German Ministry of Transport is considering a bill to ban smartphones completely, and we think that voice.
That's serious.
It's serious, yeah.
So how will they do this in practice?
To control it?
Yeah.
That's a different question. That's how, if you drive drunk, you can drive drunk, and if no one caught you, then you're a lucky guy, but it's illegal. Okay. And it's the same in California and Israel. There are 80 countries where it's fundamentally not allowed. You can, in California, the bill was, they just changed it back, but it was even that you were not allowed as a driver to look on your smartphone, right? You can shave yourself while driving 250 kilometers on a German highway, but smartphone is forbidden. And there are good reasons. First time in 25 years, the death casualty rate on US highways went up again. And the North American Transport Association calls this the Snapchat effect, right? So we have a fundamental issue. Apple just got sued by a couple. They lost their child in an accident which was caused by a driver that was using FaceTime while driving, right? So FaceTiming and boom. Right, that's something that that we will see, and we think that is something in our world that's not necessary because there are better interfaces. There's artificial intelligence to make this changing.
Yeah, I got overexcited and asked you too many questions at the same time. You explained to me very well, but maybe for the people who didn't see the video, could you exactly tell us what does Chris, so this product, do? How does it work in practice in the car?
So Chris, first of all, and you can check this on the video on Kickstarter, is a piece of hardware that connects with your smartphone. Your digital life is on the smartphone, and all of you who has a driving license using the smartphones while driving, and the 85% is it's 100%, believe me. So, and that is something that that we solve in a way that we understand the digital life that you have in the car, and communication, email, WhatsApp, messaging, and so on. And you interact while your smartphone remains in your pocket or is somewhere untouched in the car, or maybe with the kids on the rear seat and they're playing a game. You interact with this device with voice interaction, so it listens to you, you talk to it, and with gesture, and with that you get your hands on the wheels and the eyes on the road, and you don't have to drive blind while replying to WhatsApp.
Okay, so you talk to Chris, and then what does Chris say?
So we see the identification of the thing of the use case is really a co-driver. We say it's driving with a friend or your digital co-driver. So if my wife was sitting next to me while I was driving a car, right, and she would hold my smartphone, what would she do? She would say, "There's an email from Derk," and I would say, "What is it about?" And she would say, "It's about the startup camp on Friday, and everything is set, etc." And then I would say, "Oh, great! Could you just reply to him that I'm coming, all is set, no further question, and send it?" That's what she would do. And then she would say, "And there's another email from Tom." And so that's usually something that is very funny. So I want to maybe read it later, but like that. And if then there would be a higher prioritized information, she would say, "I stop reading because there's a traffic incident next to you, or you have to listen to a navigation command." How often does it happen to all of you while using your navigation on your smartphone, Google Maps, Here Maps, Apple Maps, etc., that you're exactly these 50 meters before this exit on the highway, this double exit, right? And in the very moment when you expect the navigation command, a WhatsApp is coming in. So you say, "Okay, do I have to take the first one or the second one, etc.?" You miss the first one. In the worst case, you brake, you push back, etc., increasing, you're causing an accident. And in the better case, you have just to take a detour of 7 kilometers because you have to take all the way back, and you're missing your meeting, you're losing the contract of 1 million. All these dramas we know, right? And then you're looking on your WhatsApp, and it's a smiley from Tom. So, come on, I just lost the contract of 1 million because Tom sent me a smiley. Right?
That was worth it.
That's something that we'll discuss later. So those are the elements that we have, and that's coming fundamentally by the fact that that's all great while you're sitting here. That's all great while you're in your living room and stable Wi-Fi. You can parallelize information, right? I mean, even man can do that. You have different screens, etc. So there's an email coming in. There are 27 different notifications at the same time. Fine, because at home, as long as your neighbor doesn't own a drone, you can dance naked in front of your TV and no one cares, right? Which is not when you're driving a car. So if you're moving 1.5 tons with 120 or 80 kilometers, that's a lot of power. So, and that's something where you need prioritized information. You need personalized information and context, and that's something that we're working on.
So if you want to know more, go to Kickstarter.com and type in Chris on a drive, and there you will find a video. You can order also a device, and yeah, so just I mean, you don't need it because it goes so well, but I mean, I really like it.
I need all your love, of course.
The love, only the love.
I have to pay for.
The regulators, because it's also kind of like a political. When you want to innovate, then you start to deal with regulations. Very important. So Daniel, I'll give this one to you. Obviously, a topic that you really love, so regulations. But I mean, do you think that in Germany or in Europe, where you're very active, that the mindset is already there, that mobility is becoming a concept and is becoming something that is transformed by tech and digitalization?
Well, potentially the mindset here and there is there. But, well, only with a mindset, nothing changes. And, for example, when the German long-distance bus market had been deregulated, we really think it was been so cool, but it's actually not, because we anyhow have to 3 months on average in advance to really figure out which is the route. So we are still in a fixed schedule, not because we want to, because we have to. And in Italy, it's even longer. And if we just somehow screwed up the schedule, we have to run that for another 3 months, nevertheless, if there is a passenger in the bus or no. So the good thing, and I really love Germany for this, is that we anyhow got the chance to start up this company. But it's regulated, and still legislation and regulation is so heavy and not on a demand side, on a seamless side, and so we can really act flexible and can, like with data and with all those concepts, do something good to the people, and not only because of the sake of some, in our case, I think 78 old law cannot do so.
Yeah. So
Can I? Sorry, Derk, I would just like to support that, because it's so important to me for. It's not only for the companies like Flixbus and us who suffer from that, but it's also, if we look at what's really crucial to the German economy and the automotive industry is. What we have, the reality of innovation in mobility on the streets is a disaster. Right? If you look at all the major trends that we see in the industry, whether it is electrification, whether it's autonomous driving, whether it's mobility services, none of those trends is really present on German streets or European streets, right? So if you want to see autonomous cars really on some scale, you go to California. If you want to see mobility services, you go everywhere but in Germany, because the law is so strict that it literally allows nothing beyond the regular classic transportation. And electrification is super huge in Asia, but not so much around here. So it's the same as if BMW or Volkswagen, they would invent this new model of the 5er BMW or the Golf, and we would say then, all right, that's great, but you cannot put it on the streets in Germany. Let's test it in the US, or let's test it in China. So how likely is it that invention happens in a market where you literally cannot put it on the street, where you cannot test it with real people in real markets around the corner? It's not very likely, right? And that is a big problem, because we want the industry to be, really innovative. We want it to be disruptive, but we do not allow the industry to test the things. We do not allow the people, you guys, to use the services in Germany, and that is paradox. But this is really paradox. So we need to have more regulation in a way that it says wherever it happens, we want it to be first in Germany. I would say we are the leading economy for automotive in the world, no doubt about that. But we're the last one for the new stuff on the street, and it should be the opposite. We have to have the ambition to say every autonomous car, every mobility service, every electric car is first on the street in Berlin or Hamburg or Munich, and not somewhere else. And it's not happening, and that is really a problem. One thing I have to say, last week it was that the German Parliament has approved a law for automated driving. It's a pretty modern law. It allows for more autonomous vehicles, or at least automated vehicles on the street. So there is a glimpse of the right direction, but we have to be much faster in that.
To bring that, to bring that together, well, now we have standard buses, still good in carbon dioxide per seat, but well, why not put electric engines in there, or try autonomous things? The reason is we don't actually produce those buses.
Yes,
Daimler does, Volkswagen does. But exactly what Tom said, they don't have an idea or no reason why, even together with us, come up with a prototype or so, because they say, well, it's just, why should I? I mean, it's not in our core market. We just come up with cool new diesel or whatever fuel engines, and autonomous stuff in a bus. Seriously, we last week that law for cars is passed. Nobody will do that in buses for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and then maybe you have a law for autonomous bus, but it has to drive not faster than 30 kilometers per hour, which is in UK is a very appealing thing. And in Japan, they drive with 70, 80 kilometers per hour autonomous because technically it's feasible. But I wanted to make another point to what Tom just said and Daniel. We heard this morning in the welcome speeches, we want to make Berlin the center of technology and innovation, and many things are going well. It's the 11th startup camp, and it's probably the second decade where we really create this ecosystem, and so on and so forth. But we also said it's the war of talent, right? And believe me, it's something when we don't get this into play that we also can build and test and play with what we do here, and not only on whatever type of hidden area somewhere in the forest. People will go to California, weather is anyhow nicer. So that's something what we see. And if I just was last week again in the valley, as we all have been from time to time in the valley, and it's very inspiring. We know that it's the most dense ecosystem. But as like Tom said, if you're approaching Google X, right, there's the first car coming, the first Google Egg, right, and you immediately, or I took a picture, and then you see them everywhere. So oh, that's interesting. And every single company in mobility has at least 4 or 5 charging stations at the building, because they're all driving with electrical cars. And I met 4 years ago, we'll talk about later this in my speech as well, a young entrepreneur, 27 years old, and he was the first one who did an aftermarket autonomous driving kit for cars. Cruise Automation, Kylie, 27, he sold the company a year later for $1 billion to General Motors. And I met him, it was an old Audi A6, 6-7 years old. There was something like a shoebox with 2 holes in it. It was all black, and I said, how did you drive here? The trunk was completely full with computers and so on. So I drove down the 101, and it's lane detection, etc. But how did you do that? He said, I don't need any approval. I mean, I informed the state of California or whatever, of Sunnyvale and so on, the municipality, and they said, as long as you stay on the highway and as long as you can proactively grab the wheel again if anything is happening, that's fine, right? So, and I mean, I don't know if we want to have this in that contrast, but there must be a way in between.
So Daniel, when talking about a very concrete example, data as a community, so data freely flowing around, enabling entrepreneurs like yourself to innovate, to come up with better solutions for people who are end users in the end. Do you think you see this happen in the near future? Data in Europe becoming
definitely.
commodity?
I mean, it has to become commodity, and it will be fostered by modern startups and by ourselves running around with all those smartphones and generating.
But will it be?
Well, it has to, because it's driven by us, by our smartphones. I don't need necessarily the government to pull. I mean, they should not put obstacles in our way and come up with even more strict, data laws or anything like that. But the drive is on us, because we just generate more and more data. And then companies come up and use that data and create some, layer on top of that where you can put services on top of.
Okay, but the question is, will it be? I mean, you need
some
form of cooperation.
Well, not necessarily. It depends on data. Much of the data we use is not bound to our personal informations, and then I don't need anything beside infrastructure and technology. And when it comes to improvement of the services to you as a person, yes, then you need the support of governments, because then it's about using personal data, and there it depends, how you store that, how you handle that. And obviously also there, the US is a little bit more liberal than we are, and it can be debated whether it's good or bad, but if it's not happening, no new services will increase here, but the others, the Ubers of those worlds, will just do it everywhere else and then flood our market afterwards.
Okay, but this is positive. So data privacy out of the way, Tom, so there are actually no...
I didn't say data privacy out of the way, I just said you have a liberal and precise look. And view on data privacy.
The journalist in Derk.
Scandal, then you said that.
No, but Tom, I mean, there is some space for you to innovate, obviously, with the data that you have.
Well, obviously, yeah.
The call on regulation is also not that strong then.
Well, there was space to innovate, obviously, and I don't like the entrepreneurs who just sit here and complain, and none of us is doing that. We are all doing it and successfully doing it. But still, if we look at the pace, the impact, the momentum, there is much more to achieve if we lift some veils around not only the data protection. That is one part of it, and that's somewhere in the German culture also. I don't really know where it comes from, but we are kind of, you all know this example of Google Street View, that the Germans are the country, where most people don't want their house to be on Google Street View, but the usage is like the highest in the market in Germany to look at other people's houses. So that is by Gott, I would say, in German. But the point I wanted to make is, I think what we are missing also is the opportunity that the state, that the public institutions use innovation coming from startup companies as a client. Right? So they cannot do it themselves. They have to accept that the state, public institutions, public companies, they are not designed to be innovative. They are there to last long, to be very solid. So innovation takes really an agile environment, and they don't have that. So how can they be innovative? How can they provide for a more innovative space? Well, let's work with the companies who are. And they struggle with that because it's difficult for a public institution to work with this company that does not have a track record like Siemens, right? If you are not profitable, if you are not existing for 10 years, the regulation, like the guy who sits there at the Rathaus and looks in his handbook how to work with this supplying companies, he most likely will at some point in his checklist find this KO criteria to kick the startup out. And that's a missed opportunity. The state can do a lot if they work with companies to delegate innovation to them and then to leverage what would be possible.
What we missed on data, and beside all the regulation and laws and what the support and the frameworks which need to be there, is obviously in there the free data has to be supported by infrastructure. And yes, I mean, that is what the minister said. In Bulgaria, we have probably a better network coverage and a better infrastructure than we have in Germany. Seriously, it's always the same. I'm running around Berlin with my smartphone and I lose coverage. And when I'm on vacation, I don't know, in southern Vietnam or in Namibia in the desert, well, I have full coverage, LTE. I can even support the Kickstarter campaign, right? And how can that be? How can that be that we, as Germany, and in particular right now in Berlin, want to be, the leading digital innovation city, and I cannot even run around and get my alligator because I don't have coverage?
Just to add to that story, there was a couple of years ago, I sent a personal letter to the CEO of Deutsche Telekom that I did not have coverage in Kreuzberg where I'm living, but while I was in Cambodia in the jungle I had 3G, and this is where I could send my New Year's greetings out. No,
what happened? Did he reply? Did he reply?
Yeah, what did he say to you?
What he said?
Yeah.
That was a funny thing. He called 5 days later, and 4 days later.
You had network reception?
And exactly. And I think in the evening I had network reception. I don't know. Something is happening. If you know the right guys, etc. But it was I didn't know him. I just sent a letter to him and said, this cannot be that we are in Kreuzberg worse than in the jungle of Cambodia. But that's not what I actually want to touch. I want to come to a point that Tom just made. This. I mean, we actually can talk a lot about regulation, and we want to have better networks, etc. But that's only one side of the story. On the other side, we also see, and that's something when we're talking here out of Berlin, that Germany has an issue with the technology in general, right? There is a skepticism about technology and adoption. It's not ultimately, if I talk about Facebook, etc., but it's something there is this skepticism. If you walk along a U.S. airport at a gate and you look how the people above 50, 60 consuming their media, they all have a tablet or a smartphone or a Kindle, etc. And then you look at their ankles and they all have a Fitbit and so on. Do this in Germany, you find books, papers, newspapers, magazines, etc. That's just as an example. I don't say that newspapers and books are bad things, but this curiosity and testing new things, that is something that also have to come from the users, because if the users demand it, the users are voters, right? Then policy also will move.
But I mean, in general, then the feedback is, okay, we think that technology is Facebook, we think that technology is Amazon, that it is Google, that we have to give away all our personal freedom and data in order to use this technology. So how would you explain then to those people that this is not the case?
So, I mean, that's a good point. I think it's also something, it's a perception thing. But this perception thing always ends more or less in the three similar topics, and one is this data protection. And I can tell you, I have this situation every second week, standing somewhere in Berlin in one of these organic supermarkets where all the really well-educated and whatever people buying, right? And they all actually, not all, no, but I would assume some of them are very much against any open data structures and pro-privacy and very much against Facebook, and some of them maybe have already left a post on Facebook, now it's enough and I am this, etc. So, and then they come to the cashier, right? And the cashier asks, do you have a card from us, right? Do you have a loyalty card? Exactly. And you can bet 99% say, yeah, please. And even if they only bought for $4.35, right? That's the irony, and that's this bigot thing, right? They're using the smartphones, and the smartphone reads out of you everything, right? So a mobile operator today knows everything of you, right? They're using cars that are connected, right? Without knowing what's happening with the data, and they're using loyalty cards and similar programs that tracks you like a very personal diary. So it's something I think where we have to come to an open and also to a fair discussion and say what is we want to protect. Of course, it's not about like I mean, in Scandinavia, you send a text message with a number plate of a car, and you get the text declaration of that person. That's a different attitude, right? We don't have this here, but it's something where we also have to see the benefit out of that, and that also plays into the technology.
And it's not only about the technology surrounding data. Well, yes, currently the leading companies are in the US, but even when we hit the time where all vehicles are autonomous, well, someone also has to build those autonomous vehicles, potentially with E or fuel cell powered, and not necessarily with some fossil stuff. But it has to be built. And for instance, there are also very good examples where Germany remains with great engineering market leader. The world market leader in 3D printing sits close to Munich. So fair, all cool. But the question is, what do we want? And just have an open discussion, and not you just saying left or right or somewhere in the middle, and then I use Facebook on the one hand, and then I just complain that it's stored in the US, and that's awkward. And it has to be open and curious. And I guess that's also something we have in common, because before you found a company, you're usually curious, you're driven by something. And if that comes together, well, Germany has like a great future. We have great talent, specifically in those large and international cities like Berlin. But we have to discuss openly, I totally agree.
Do you see any good examples in Germany or in Europe where there are good open discussions on this topic? Are there good examples that we can share here, or you have personally favorites?
So I have two. I would agree that Scandinavia is very much open-minded, and generally also on the open data strategies driven by the government, they are really, driving that initiatives, and that is not meant by personal data, just by general data, A, and B, France in that is a very good example with the bus markets. They saw how the liberalization in Germany worked well, and they really liberalized. So if you have your bus, you just go to France and just provide a service. You don't have to, do things in advance, or have to double check 3 months with some authorities whether that timetable is fitting or no. You just go there. It's liberalized means you take a bus, hit the road, transfer people.
France is a great example, by the way. I mean, what they did over the past 5 years is that they decided as a country, we want to lead in technology again, right? And they said, we need liberalization, we need money. They pumped a lot of money, literally a lot of money, billions, into funds, into accelerators, etc. And I went to the CES in January, which is the leading tech show in the world for many years, and it was my literally 15th year there. And the second language there was French. And there were so many French innovative companies, and they are so. I mean, we see this. See what's happening with the PSA at the moment, right? How I mean, they're buying Opel. They have a good reason for that, and I'm very happy for the guys from.
You think that's a technology play?
It's a technology and a mindset play. It's something that we say, okay, and that's something. I mean, we don't have always to bash us here. I mean, it's a great environment, and the reason why we're here it is. But when you're asking where is the initiative that really stands out, then I think what French tech at the moment doing is impressive. Let's see where it leads, right? Because too much money into an ecosystem also can lead to a lack of quality. We know all of that. But first of all, I think it's a great move, and that's something where we have in Germany. We have the IBB here in Berlin. We have all the state funded subsidies and so on and so forth. But it still is very fragmented, right? Okay. Every ministry has now accelerator. Every ministry invites startups. Every ministry wants to talk to the scene and to investors and feels responsible to fly to the valley. And I don't know. That's something I think where we just have to say we have to act here as an ecosystem, as an economy, way better than we do it today.
Yeah, one example I want to bring even from Germany. So we see that. More and more public institutions embrace the opportunities coming from technology. So it's happening, right? The mindset starts to change. And one example I can share is from the city of Duisburg. Right? Not the first one you might have on your list if you have to guess. Duisburg is a 350,000 people city in the west of Germany. Not the easiest environment because they have a long history going back to coal and stuff. But there, particularly the transportation company now, they got it, right? They say there are so many options out there. Why leave it to the Googles and Ubers of the world, to be these very convenient services? Why can't we be as convenient and provide new services? Ride-hailing, ride-sharing, that is a new public transport. And why sitting here looking at the regulation to kick the others out of the market? And why not instead being the one who says, hey, we are doing 90% of transportation anyway. Let's do the new stuff, the nice stuff, the stuff with the fame too. And then they come to us and say, hey, you are a tech company, we are not. Can you help us? Can you provide the tools that we need to be as sexy as an Uber in New York? And that is what we do, right? So literally we sell sex appeal to public institutions, and that starts to work very nice.
You're good at that.
Thank you, yeah.
So ladies and gentlemen, this was it from our side. Give it up for these wonderful gentlemen.
Thank you.
Sex appeal.
Slapstick.
On the future of mobility. And if you want to check out the selfies that they will take next to the stage, Holger and Tom, then go to their Facebook and their website. So